Dave.
That was them. That was not me. I was out of the
The
way.
plant was in the way, is that what you said?
Plant.
Oh, okay, that's a plant.
Call the meeting to order. Those that care to, please stand for an opening prayer and pledge of allegiance. Mr. Cameron, would you lead us in prayer?
I will. Let us pray. Dear Father, we just thank you for this day and thank you for all that you do for us, Lord. Thank you for this community. Thank you for the group of people that's gathered here tonight that's come out to be a part of what we're doing and to talk about the business of the city. I pray that you would lead and guide us and direct us in all that we do and all that we say. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Packed house tonight. I like it. Thank you so much for coming. I would like to open things up for citizen participation. Anyone wishing to speak to something not on the agenda, please approach the podium. You will be given 3 minutes to speak. No one? All right. Well, let me know if you change your mind. Until then, I'm going to close citizen participation and move on to the consent agenda. I would welcome any council members to ask any questions about items number 1 through 4 on the agenda. And if there are no questions, I would entertain a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda.
Motion. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 7-0. Upcoming boards, commissions, and committees schedule. We have a Board of Adjustments meeting on January 4th, Planning and Zoning meeting on January 8th, and City Council meetings on January 9th and January 23rd. I will let people know
Yes.
that we've moved things around a little bit on the City Council, which created a couple of conflicts. Unfortunately, your mayor and your mayor pro tem both have boys playing basketball on that night, so we're trying to figure out what we're going to do, whether we're going to nominate someone else to run the meeting, whether we're going to shift meetings. We'll figure it out, and we will make an announcement and make sure it's given to the press.
Correct.
Very good. Moving on to old business and tabled items. Item number 5 on our agenda. This was tabled from November 14th, 2023. I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 23-53 by title only, please.
Motion. Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 7-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council approving the final plat of the Harper Ridge Phase 1 subdivision.
Thank you, ma'am. Any updates from staff?
Final inspections have been completed of the subdivision and staff recommends approval.
Thank you. Questions, comments, or discussion from council on this issue? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion and a second for the final passage of Bill 23-52, please. Excuse me. Is this 23-53?
Yes.
53.
Motion. Second.
We have a motion and a second. We will now take a roll call vote on our computers. Resolution or ordinance passes by a vote of 7-0. Moving on to item number 6 on our agenda. This is 23-58. I need a motion and a second for the second reading of this bill by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 7-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council approving an amendment of the zoning classification of approximately 0.81 acres of real property located at 445 U.S. Highway 60 East from local commercial C1 to general commercial C2.
Thank you, ma'am. Any updates from staff?
No updates.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, comments, or discussion from council? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion and a second for the final passage of Bill 23-58.
Motion. Second.
Are we good?
Who was the motion? Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. We will now take a roll call vote. Motion passes by a vote of 7-0. Moving on to item number 7 on our agenda. This is 23-59. I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 23-59 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 7-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council approving amendment of the zoning classification of approximately 40.46 acres of real property located at 7217 West Farm Road 182 from agricultural AG to medium-density, single-family residential R1M.
Thank you, ma'am. Any updates from staff?
No updates.
Any questions, comments, or discussion from council? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion and a second for final passage of Bill 23-59.
Motion. Second.
Motion and a second. We will now take a roll call vote. Ordinance passes by a vote of 7-0. Item number 8 on our agenda, this is 23-60. I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 23-60 by title only, please.
Motion. Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 7-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council approving the final plat of the Woods subdivision.
Any updates from staff on this issue?
There was an updated version of the plat that should have been provided to council. The update has no material changes from the previously reviewed version. Bailey Street became Bailey Avenue, London Avenue became London Place, and also a correction was made to the signing statements for staff to sign.
Questions, comments, or discussion from council on this issue? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion and a second for the final passage of Bill 23-60, please.
Motion. Second.
Motion is second. We will now take a roll call vote on our computers. Ordinance passes by a vote of 7-0. Moving on to item number 9 on our agenda, this is 23-61. Now, I understand that there's a request to table this ordinance, is that correct?
That's correct.
Very good. I would entertain why are we wanting to table it?
In this case, we wait for the final, for the subdivision, for the final plat to be, have all completed infrastructure to be installed. We're waiting on some of that to be done, so we'll give them a little bit more time to do that.
So just, Mr. Mayor,
Please.
for clarification, do you want it tabled to the January 12th meeting? Just so we don't have to do the public notice again, so we can make the tabling of the record.
Yes.
We need to state the date. So do you want to table to, in the motion, table it to January?
January 9th.
I'm sorry, January 9th? Thank
Yes,
you.
to the please table this, I'm requesting table.
So that'll need,
January 9th.
thank you. So that'll need to be in the motion to table it to January 9th.
Luckily, that was already in my notes.
Thank you.
Yes.
See what will happen if he's not
Yeah.
around January 9th?
Yeah, things will fall
Mess.
apart. Yeah. I would entertain a motion and a second to table ordinance 23-61 to the January 9th, 2024 meeting.
Motion. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we need to do a roll call vote on that, or can that just be a? Can we do a roll call vote?
We can.
Voice vote. Don't
Councilmember
make me say
Updike?
that. Voice vote. Yes.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson.
Aye.
Councilmember Gerlich.
Aye.
Councilmember Fields.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Franklin.
Aye.
Councilmember Gerke.
Aye.
Ordinance has been tabled to the January 9th, 2024 meeting. Moving on to fun stuff.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell, would you please come up and be sworn in as our new city council member? Now be careful, Laura has a history of swearing people in as police officers rather than.
Did you learn the secret handshake? That's all I want to know.
Laura's
Okay.
going to do it, so
By the way, this is my family right here.
thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Julie,
We-
my 2 daughters, and son-in-law.
We have heard a lot about you, so.
Did he really go to lunch with you every week? Look at you like that.
Whether we wanted him to or not.
All right. If you want to raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Darren Campbell,
I, Darren Campbell,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I possess all the qualifications
that I possess all the qualifications
prescribed for my office by law,
prescribed
for my office
for
by
my
law,
office by law.
that I will support the Constitution
I will support the Constitution
of the United
of the
States,
United States
the state of Missouri,
and the state of Missouri,
the provisions of all laws
the provisions of all laws
of this state
of this state
affecting cities of this class,
affecting the cities of this class,
and the ordinances
and the ordinances
of the City of Republic,
of the City of Republic,
that I will faithfully
and that I will faithfully,
demean myself in office
I'm sorry.
demean myself in
Demean
office.
myself in office.
So help me God.
So help me God.
You're done.
Congratulations.
The oath is on the charter, so we can't deviate.
Absolutely. It's always a speech after.
I know where my pen is for.
You want it back?
I do.
Okay.
I'm going, where's my pen?
Okay.
We'll give it to him. We'll put it ceremoniously.
You did?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now you know where you can go and voice your complaints.
What's that?
Thanks, Laura.
Just come on up and have a seat. For those of you that were curious why we did this halfway through the meeting, we did not want a city council member voting on stuff they didn't hear the first time around. So that took care of all the old business. Now we're going to start the new business, so he'll be able to vote on that for the next meeting. And Laura's waiting for me to sign, so I'll quit talking. Thank you, ma'am. All right, moving on to new business. This is item number 10 on our agenda. I would entertain a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 23-62 by title only, please.
Motion. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 8-0. There we go. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council approving the final plat of the Stone Creek Falls Phase 2 subdivision.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Tabor.
Good evening, Chris Tabor, Principal Planner. The Buildings Department is requesting the approval of an application for the final plat of Phase 2 of Stone Creek Falls. The final plat would legally divide 28.49 acres into 5 lots of multifamily R3. This includes the dedication of right-of-way, utility infrastructure, and other various easements. The final plat conforms to the development plan for Stone Creek Plan Development District approved on April 11th, 2023. The Buildings Department has reviewed the final plat and determined it conforms to the requirements of the approved development plan and the city's final plating code. Staff is recommending approval.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any questions for Mr. Tabor on this issue? Seeing none, please remember this is a first read, so if you have any questions before the vote next meeting, please get with staff. Moving on to item number 11 on the agenda, I would entertain a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 23-63 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
There was a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 8-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council calling an election on the question of whether to impose an additional 3% sales tax on tangible personal property retail sales of adult use, non-medical marijuana sold within the city pursuant to Article 14, Section 2.6, subsection 5 of the Missouri Constitution, calling an election to be held on April 2nd, 2024, on the proposed sales tax, and authorizing and directing the city clerk to give notice to the county clerk of said election.
I know that the city clerk and the city attorney are here ready to answer questions, but before we start that, we are going to turn it over to Mr. Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So for the citizens that are watching or want to learn more about the next 7 agenda items that we are discussing, we did hold a work session, was it 2 or 3 weeks ago? It is on our website that goes into each one of these questions in more detail. Tonight, we're going to be going through the actual titles of those documents. If there's additional questions between now and the January 9th meeting, we'll be able to take those. We will not be going into the exact detail or the depth of these questions tonight. If you want to see those between now and that meeting, you can go to the video that you can see that we've got into a little bit more discussion and answered some more questions, and we'll do our best to answer those tonight. But I've asked staff for brevity in just covering these topics tonight on the actual titles of themselves. Thank you.
Short and sweet.
Short and sweet.
Okay, Amendment 3, legalized adult use marijuana, which would be non-medical marijuana. It gave the cities a 3% sales tax option. We do have to get a vote of the people in order to have that. This would not apply to any medical marijuana, so if somebody has a prescription, it would not apply to them. The funds would go to the general fund as Amendment 3 allowed. Things that this could be used for would be police officer vehicles. It could do a mile of overlay per year. Or more importantly, and we'll hear about this later, is wastewater treatment plant improvements. So every bit of this could contribute to the things that are being impacted on our citizens at this point. We went into a lot more detail in our workshop, but if anybody has any questions at this point, we can try and answer them now.
Do we have questions on this issue? Mr. Franklin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did have a question, and I think I found my answer in that, but I was curious. This tax, this does not have a sunset. Would that be correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so, looking through this, is there anything that this particular business causes the City of Republic to do beyond any other business? I mean, other than the licensing, is there something that this particular business causes in excess to the City of Republic more than any other business?
Mr. Mayor,
Please.
not to my knowledge.
Okay. And so since our last meeting, I have found out a few things here, and I may just move into my statements unless anyone else has any questions. Just the statements of what I've found since my investigation since our last meeting.
Mr. Gerke?
I know we referenced what we could, do we have an estimate of what we would project this to generate in revenue?
I
We don't-
believe it was somewhere around the $150,000 a year measurement,
Thank you.
without divulging what we believe based upon how we derive at those numbers. But we can extrapolate some data from sales tax generation, but in respect to the actual business that we know,
Yeah.
we're not allowed to disclose. So we kind of use general terms, but it's approximately about 150 to 200,000 a year.
Is there a max, excuse me, a max number of businesses that we'd be able to use this off of?
Yes, there's only one dispensary in town, and so dispensaries are established by statute based upon, just like it is, medical dispensaries. You're only allowed so many permitted dispensaries per an area. So right now, there's only one that is permitted for hours, and so basically that is based upon demographic, size of your community, things of that nature. So there is none that we have impending or being submitted to us at this time. And that would also be limited basically based upon the growth of the city in and of itself. So basically as Republic continues to grow, that would probably trigger the availability of another dispensary that wanted to enter the market.
So we have only one and we're only maxed at one right now?
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions about this? Mr. Franklin, you wanted to make some statements?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just more or less wanted to let everyone know what I'd found out since our last meeting. When I started this out, I started looking at, justifying this tax since this business and this product is already taxed and already paying the same tax as everyone else, and this is an additional new 3 tax on top of that. When I look at the example of paving a mile of streets, I look at this business and the product, and I can't find a way that this business has created that need any more than anyone else. The example with the cop cars, same thing, and I'm sure any example I could fit in there, I really couldn't justify that this business or this product created that cost for the additional taxation. I know we can do this, but I'm still struggling with the fact of doing this. I took a little trip over to our one dispensary in town and took a little tour, got a little insight from the business owner as to what goes on in that establishment, which in itself made me a little bit more comfortable about having a dispensary in Republic. What I found was that currently our sales tax rate here in Republic is already higher than some of the closest competitors that this business has. Even though some of these other cities have passed this 3% additional marijuana tax, if we were to pass a 3% additional marijuana tax on the recreational as well, we would eliminate that competition from that business to other cities. Right now, currently, we are only 2% lower than their tax, even though they have already passed a 3% tax. So if we pass a 3% tax additional on top of this, that product will be taxed 1% higher only in Republic for our one dispensary. So when I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at that, non-discriminatory, if not in my opinion of the marijuana use, but from a citizen that was in Republic that was their choice of recreation, it would be cheaper for them to travel to our neighboring cities to get the same product that they could get here from a local business. And that's another thing I had found while visiting this dispensary here in town, is that it is a local business. And I know a lot of people in Republic really respect that local business aspect. I didn't have a chance to look at all of them, and I don't know if our neighbors, there are some special taxing districts, which I understand, but from the majority, the base rate, our rate is higher than the most of these cities. So even though they've passed it, Right now will be lower. If we pass that, we make ours the highest tax that's currently in our area within a perimeter of 5 miles or so from that one business in Republic. So the tax rate itself was something concerning. I know I'd like to give a business every opportunity to be competitive, and that 3% in addition will automatically make ours higher than anyone else. And I look at this and I look back at our tape and I looked at sending this to the voters and letting the people to decide, which, of course we like to do that. We send it to the voters so the people can decide, and that's fair. But when we look at the turnout of the elections and we look at the percentages, I understand that's nothing we can control as a council. That's the residents. But every time we do that, we have to have an understanding of the percentage of people that are going to turn out to vote. That, in respect of percentage-wise, it's a small percentage of Republic voters making a decision for a larger portion of Republic voters. And so in my duty as a city council member, I'm really having a hard time with this just because it is such an unfair tax percentage based upon a product and doing it just because we can versus finding a need. So the tax rate was definitely something that was a little bit concerning on me. Having that tour of the dispensary and getting that point of view from the owner was very vital in understanding what goes on there and the people that are involved in that. So other than that, I just kind of wanted to touch base and let you know what I'd found out as far as the tax rate and where that would put our one business in competition with this tax rate that is abnormally high.
Thank you for your thoughts, sir. Any other follow-up?
Do you have a proposal then to make it fair, in your opinion?
It's, in my opinion, fair as it is now because they already pay the same tax that every other product in town does.
Well, fair is equal. And if you're comparing not things in town but other surrounding cities, wouldn't fair be equal to those cities and not just what's existing right now? I mean, right now we're 2% under. It
I
sounds
took
like
an
you're
oath to
saying
the
we should
citizens of
be.
Republic, not of Springfield. So
I'm sorry?
I took an oath to the citizens of Springfield, not of
No, but that's when you made your statement, you were comparing our city and its tax rates
Sure.
versus other surrounding areas. So
Sure.
I'm curious as to what is fair in your mind.
fair is the lowest possible rate and taking only what we need to take with a justified cause. That's fair.
See, but you can't make a comparison and call that fairness. You understand that argument?
Fairness in Republic from one product to another product within the city limits. Fair is in they pay the tax that everyone else pays in the exact percentage, and then some to the state.
But wouldn't 2% to equal out what's happening around us be most fair?
But then I
Because right
couldn't-
now it sounds like you're trying to give a marijuana business in Republic the advantage over other areas.
And what would be wrong with that in Republic on giving one of a business in Republic an advantage
no,
over a
that's
business
what
in another
I'm not
city?
saying there's anything wrong with it. I just want you to.
And I looked at this from a standpoint of compromise. 2%, 1%. Should we go to where it's even, or should we take that step to allow our businesses to have the advantage over other businesses in other cities?
That's fine. If you want to give a dispensary an advantage in Republic, that's
And not a dispensary. I'm
that's
looking
fine
for
with
a
me.
fair playing field
that's
for
what this
all
is about. I'm
businesses
talking
in
about
Republic.
I'm talking about the dispensary. I'm not.
Even
I don't-
though by the
the other
state they already
businesses.
pay a higher percentage.
Sure. I also didn't care for your assessment of our local elections, it's not the people who show up to vote's fault that other people don't show up to vote. So their opinions and casting their votes, it's not their fault that they did it and other people didn't. And their responses, being the only people who stood up to do it, should be counted.
And I agree to you.
Yeah. I think you disparaged
my
them a
problem
little
with
bit.
that is, as a city council, I mean, if that were the case, then everything that comes in here, there's no reason for us to vote. We just send it to the ballot. Our duty as a city council is to protect 49% of the people from 51% of the people. So when we go to the ballot, we always have to take that into consideration, the percentage of turnout. And we look at that percentage of turnout and what percentage of people actually decide for the entirety of Republic. Now, I'm not saying I should interfere with that. I'm saying we need to give that every bit of thought possible, because when that goes to the ballot, we know those percentages are a very small percentage.
Well, wouldn't you consider that just as important as electing its mayor or city council member?
They elect us to make those decisions.
They elect
to keep
us in
this from
an election.
an unfair percentage to the citizens. This is unfair to a certain percentage of citizens in the Republic that have to pay a higher tax without a just cause.
So those people who would then put their names on the ballot to be elected to this council it would be an unfair public election when they inevitably get elected?
I'm saying the same percentages apply. We as a council need to make that distinction whenever we're adding something in addition to the ballot.
Sure, but I understand that this issue specifically and just generally, wouldn't you support giving as much of an option to the people as possible in something that also affects them? And I mean, we could probably talk to the chief of police here about what, you know, the percentage of threat to our community when a new bar comes to town or a new dispensary comes to town, what that does. I mean, I'm more than willing to ask some questions to Chief Sells if he's willing to, but when this affects everybody in that sense, why wouldn't it be allowed to go to the people? It sounds like you're trying to take like an issue that would affect everybody, give them an opportunity to vote on it. It sounds like you're trying to take it back, and
I'm making my best
that.
attempt to protect 49% of the people from 51% of the people. And when you look at a representative republic, that's the sole cause of it. So when I look at the spirit of what we're doing here, yes, something that's this unfair, I'm not comfortable sending this to a ballot to letting the people decide. That's what they elected me for, was to make that sort of a decision. And I'm not saying I make every decision for them. I'm saying if they elected me up here, that's part of my decision in this process, is protecting the people from an unfair application of tax.
But it sounds like you're the only one on this council of 8, unless somebody else wants to speak up.
Well, if we
that
all want
deems
to
this
agree
as
on everything
unfair.
all the time, that's perfectly fine. But you're not going to find me to agree with you 100% of the time. That's why we're up here.
And look, I'm not saying we need to agree 100% of the time, but when we're talking about fairness, that's a balanced scale. And when one of 8 people is saying this is unfair, to me, that's an unbalanced scale. And fairness in that instance goes with the other 7.
So to be fair, I have to agree with everyone here?
I'm sorry?
So to be fair, I have to agree with everyone here.
I don't think fairness is your or mine or anybody singularly on this council to judge. I think that's up to the people
and
to judge.
what I'm going to suggest is that perhaps we've gotten a little bit far.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know. Look, we can talk political philosophy all day long, and I think that's exactly where we're at right now, but we aren't talking about the ordinance any longer. So does anyone else on council have it?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
A couple questions. The first one for Mr. Franklin. When you were talking to the dispensary, did you get an idea of average product cost? Like, what's a normal customer spend while they're there?
So I didn't actually discuss that with them. I looked at that later on, looking down through their website, and it varies. You know, I don't know what whatever particular product someone purchases. It looked like anything from maybe $20, $35 all the way up in excess of several $100s. So it's a pretty substantial cost when you're looking at every product that they sell. And then when we're looking even as a city and promoting tourism with the lazy river and everything else, we're bringing people to Republic. And so we want to bring people to Republic to spend their money. If they're spending it all at a dispensary, if they choose to do that, $100, that's $18 out of that goes to taxes in addition. That's $18 that they could spend at a fast food restaurant, or they could go down to the lazy river and spend it, or however they saw fit is kind of the point I'm trying to make.
And then my follow-up question, probably Mr. Cameron, do we have other products in the city that are taxed at different rates, such as cigarettes?
Yes.
Other questions from council on this issue? We do have a citizen here wishing to speak to the issue. Alex Paulson? Did I say that right? Yes. Sorry, I couldn't read your writing. I apologize.
I'm sorry.
Alex, come on up. Come to the podium. We give everybody 3 minutes to talk. So state your name and what you want to say.
Yeah, awesome. My name's Alex Paulson. Thank you guys all for having me here. I am the owner of the sole dispensary in town, so I can speak on a lot of these questions that you might have. The main thing that I came to discuss is mostly just the difference between the white market and the black market. What a lot of us here are discussing, we're all assuming that in the conversation of fairness, well, if the taxes are a little higher over here, I'm just going to go over here. That's not the case. That's not the reality. People have been consuming this medicine for hundreds of years, and just over the past 20 years, they've had a legal program for it. There are thousands of other places for them to go get it, and those other places to go get it are 100% untaxed. And those other places to go get it are much more dangerous than anything that we're talking about that we have to do with. So what ends up happening, and what we've already even seen happen, is we have several hundred patients a day come through our store. In the past year, we've legalized recreationally, which has went from us seeing 50 to 75 patients a day to seeing 200 plus patients a day. What that obviously, when demand goes way up, supply didn't have a chance. It's still a living, growing thing. Supply didn't quite have a chance to go up. So what happened? So demand went way up, supply stayed the same. That drove the prices to the moon, right? So what we saw was our average ticket go from $50 or $60 to $70 or $80, nearly double. But also what we saw was foot traffic fell about half. I can assure you, none of those people stopped smoking marijuana. They all went back to their dealers, every single one of them. They would come in and tell us, sorry, I just got to go see my guy now. I gotta go to Oklahoma now. Sorry, I can't, because Oklahoma has no testing. They have 7,000 licenses over there. You can get anything you want for $10. So what we saw was people going and finding it from untaxed areas or completely taking the revenue completely out of Missouri. What we're looking at here, I don't disagree with the argument is we don't necessarily need to compare to Springfield for sake of fairness. But what we will do is we will drive business from the two closest dispensaries, from our dispensary, which is a locally owned dispensary. Me and my business partner, Drew, have been in the community for our whole lives. Both of our dads ran businesses in the community for 30 plus years. We are locally owned businesses. What we'll drive that business to is Good Day Farms, which is owned by all of the Walmart board, basically. All those guys live down in Florida. Or we'll drive them to Revival 98, which is small, partially owned by Grant Windstrom, mostly owned by out-of-state investors. So we will send that money to Springfield, which is not a single one of those shops are locally owned by communities and by members of the community. So it's not necessarily a conversation on fairness. I think we should absolutely try to find, if there is a need for more money in the general fund, and this is a way that we can do it, I think we should try to find something in the middle that allows a locally owned Republic business to continue to thrive, continue to use a little bit of that arbitrage in the tax, while also still putting a little bit to the extra bottom line. So,
Mr. Paulson, I truly appreciate your comments.
Absolutely.
Don't go anywhere.
Yeah, no.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Paulson on this issue? This is a subject matter expert. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
For sure. Yeah, sorry that I was late. I went to City Hall.
I come late sometimes too. No, thanks for coming.
For sure, yeah.
And I appreciate what you said there at the end of finding like a medium, because I think that, if the numbers don't add up to where we are competitive, then that doesn't make sense for us, just as a community as a whole, regardless of business.
Yeah.
And so, is there a number that you, as the sole business owner, you and Drew, have in mind? Like, if you could change this, if you could rewrite this ordinance, how would you rewrite it?
Yeah, well, from 100% selfish perspective, obviously,
Yeah.
as a business owner, I want the best competitive advantage that I can get. So I would say we don't raise it at all, right? From 100% my perspective, and that's just showing you guys that I'm honest.
Yeah.
That's what I'd say too.
Yes, I mean,
yeah.
seriously, yeah. Why would I want my customers to have to pay any more tax? But what I would suggest is a 2% maximum. But really, what we should still do is lean into the competitive advantage, and I truly do believe that. A quarter of our entire patient catalog is from Springfield, and we have about half of those people are out of state. We have a ton of recreational traveling and things like that, and people come through Republic for Thanksgiving, Christmas, all that stuff. Hundreds of people out of state constantly. So, but on a day-to-day basis, when we're not talking about holiday traffic, close to half of our everyday traffic is people coming from Springfield to buy in Republic.
Yeah.
And that is a number that will go down if we raise that tax to be higher than them.
Sure.
They are aware of it, not every single one of them, and 2% is not enough to break anybody's bank, but it's enough for some people they vote with their dollar, and they'll oftentimes come out to see us. We also do a really good job, but we will lose some of that business. It will go down if we raise this.
And one more question for you, if you don't mind. Does putting this issue to a vote with the citizens, say we change it to 2%, all hypothetical at this point. say it was 2%, would it make you nervous to put that in front of the voters?
Not necessarily. I think they're for sure going to vote on it. I think a lot of people look at it as just a well, why wouldn't we type of thing, you know? But from I really appreciate the way that Eric looks at it. Is well, to me that can sound a little bit government overreachy, right? I think all of us in here are small enough, you know, to understand that. We don't just want the government to tax us every time they have the ability to do so, right? I think we all know that there's nothing really wrong with marijuana. Just because it's got legalized in our lifetimes, there's nothing wrong with it. It's no different than alcohol or cigarettes or anything else. So that's really kind of what I would say to that.
Okay. Thanks, man. Thanks for answering
Absolutely.
my questions.
Yeah.
Mr. Campbell?
You answered my question.
Oh, perfect. Other questions?
I do have a question, not for just a general. On the ballot cost, to add this to the ballot,
There is no additional because we already have a general election for the elections.
thank you.
Sir, thank you so much for coming
Yeah.
and speaking. Truly do appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you guys for letting me talk, even though I was a few minutes late. I appreciate it.
You were great. You were great. All right. We are going to move on from this unless anybody else has anything. All right. Seeing nothing, please remember this is a first read. Get with staff about any suggestions, ideas, thoughts, and we will take it up at the next meeting. Moving on to item number 12 on our agenda, I would entertain anybody here that doesn't want to stay for the rest of this. I totally understand. Item number 12 on the agenda. I would entertain a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 23-64 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 8-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council proposing amendments to the city charter pertaining to the appointment, term, and minimum qualifications and duties of the city attorney, calling an election to be held on April 2nd, 2024 on the proposed amendments, authorizing and directing the city clerk to give notice to the county clerk of said election, and providing for enactment of the proposed amendments if approved.
Thank you, ma'am.
This one has not changed since the workshop, so it will be short and sweet. This would just make the appointment of city attorney be under the city administrator for reporting as opposed to the mayor. And then it actually establishes the position in the charter, whereas it currently is not established in the charter and just sets forth some minimum requirements for that.
Questions, comments, or discussion on this issue? Mr. Franklin.
Mr. Mayor, and so I just kind of I'm curious. I kind of understand. I think I understand this. So if a city attorney, I'm not saying Megan's going anywhere, but if the city attorney if we were to look for a new city attorney, is that entire process through the city administrator?
Mr. Mayor,
Please.
it would be just like every other city employee.
It just like so we would just
Police
one
chief,
day we would
fire
be here
chief.
and would have a new.
Yes.
Okay, not saying it.
Anything else, Mr. Franklin?
was it.
Well, I do have a couple of thoughts on this as mayor. As many of you know, I happen to be an attorney in my day job. So as I came into this role as mayor, I happen to have a really good view of what the legal market is and the legal field is. So the current status is I would decide, and then it would come before the council to determine whether or not they would agree with what my decision is. And I happen to have known Megan, and so I was able to vouch for her legal work. I saw her at trial. I was impressed. Said she'd be a good city prosecutor, and then she was, and then became a good city attorney. And that's really unique because, frankly, a normal mayor doesn't know what a lawyer does day in and day out. I happen to because that's my profession for the last 20 years. So we got really lucky that I happen to know Megan. Former mayors, the next mayors, likely aren't going to be lawyers. So this is a much better idea to me, even sitting in the mayor's spot, because you need an attorney that works in a business, and this is a business. And a mayor picking that attorney for the business may not know the business of the city as well as the city administrator, and they likely won't know the attorneys as well to choose from. So to me, this turns this from a political position to a business position, and to me, that's smart. So I'm in favor of this question number 1, even though it's giving up a little bit of power from the mayor's spot. This is just good business. So that's my thoughts on this.
Thank you.
Anything else hearing that? Seeing none? We will move on to item number 13. This is 23-65. I would entertain a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 23-65 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 8-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council proposing an amendment to the city charter establishing a schedule for the election of council members to staggered 4-year terms at the general municipal election held on even years, calling an election to be held on April 2nd, 2024, on the proposed amendment, authorizing and directing the city clerk to give notice to the county clerk of said election, and providing for enactment of the proposed amendment if approved.
Thank you, ma'am.
That kind of summed it up a little bit. Basically, when we changed the charter in 2019, we made that stagger 2 years in a row and then skipped 2 years. And this is to even it out, to only have elections on even years, to spread it out to even terms for everybody. The only thing that's the key part to talk about here is how we would enact this. So we have the 2024 election. You have Group A seats and Group B seats. Group A seats will have a 4-year term after the 2024 election. Group B will have a 1-year term. We will have another election in 2025 for the Group B seats and have another 1-year term for them. And then in 2026, they will have a 4-year term. And then from that point on, we will be on even years moving forward, as it should have been in the first place, ideally.
Yes. Questions on this? Mr. Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my question on this one, and it may be on down the line on the next one, but what happens if the mayor resigns in that 4-year period? Does this still allow for those staggering terms for an election of a mayor for the remainder of a term, or?
Mr. Cameron?
Mr. Mayor, the answer would be at the next municipal election, if the mayor, what's nice about this is, say it was in 2024 the mayor resigned, there would be an election in 2025. If it was in 2025, the way the charter is written now is it's at each municipal election, so that's why you have some people that would serve a 3-year term, or maybe almost 3.5. You now have terms where these would be considered municipal elections, so it'd be 2024, 2025, 26, or 28. Whereas if it was this year, we got a 2024. Historically, if the resignation would have occurred in 2024, you'd be waiting till 2027 prior to, or no, 2028 before you could actually fill that position. So here you've got actually 3 different years you could cover the re-election.
And I see that for the forthcoming, the near future. On after that, once we're all established with those 4-year terms and everyone's on that every other year term, if the mayor resigns, does that go back to being elected that odd year to a 2-year term, or does that reset to like a 4-year term?
Mr. Mayor,
Please.
So that would go to a 2-year. It'd be to fulfill the remaining obligation of the original term, just like it is now. So you would only be fulfilling the original obligation of the person that vacated the seat. So it would not be for a 4-year term. It would only be to complete the previous term.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Other questions on this issue?
I just have a comment.
Please.
Being in Group B is lame.
It's a good trial run for people who don't know if they are going to like it.
There you go.
That's my sales pitch.
Any other comments, questions, discussion? Seeing none, we will move on to item number 14. I would entertain a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 23-66 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 8-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council proposing an amendment to the city charter to clarify the procedure for filling vacancies in the City Council, calling an election to be held on April 2nd, 2024, on the proposed amendment, authorizing and directing the city clerk to give notice to the county clerk of said election, and providing for enactment of the proposed amendment if approved. This would not actually change the procedure that we are currently using. It would just clarify for everybody who has not been part of these decisions and not been in these conversations that it's with expiring council seats on the ballot. So it would be even years. That's simply put, that's the extent of it.
Questions on this
Hopefully
issue?
easy.
And Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, this is to avoid that we would not have 3-year terms.
Or special elections.
Or special elections for vacancies.
Mr. Mayor, I have
Sir.
one question. What happens if question 2 fails and question 3 succeeds? Does that cause any problems?
No.
You say that really confidently.
These are basically redundancies, just in case one of them doesn't pass.
All right.
Great question.
Anything else? All right, moving on to item number 15. I would entertain a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 23-67 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 8-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council proposing an amendment to the city charter establishing procedures for the passage of ordinances in a single open meeting of the City Council and allowing for the second reading of ordinances to occur as part of the consent agenda for an open council meeting, calling an election to be held on April 2nd, 2024, on the proposed amendment, authorizing and directing the city clerk to give notice to the county clerk of said election, and providing for enactment of the proposed amendment if approved. If you want to pull up the sample agenda, that's the easiest way to explain it. So I have a sample agenda in front of you. There's also one with comments on it, so you can reference it after this meeting in case you forget how we talk about it. So first we'll talk about the having second readings on the consent agenda. So you'll see we took this meeting and just put things in different places for you. So you will see there are 3 ordinances on that consent agenda. We would do a motion and second to take up the consent agenda. I would read the titles of each ordinance that are within this consent agenda, and then we would do a digital vote to approve. The protection for you is that if you want to talk about one that's on there, we can pull it. So you don't have to leave it on there. You'll see it's published in advance, so you'll know it's coming. You can be prepared and ask for it to be pulled. Second, you can also vote no on any of the items on the consent agenda at any time, just by letting me know which one you want to vote no on. So there are protections for you and for citizens in doing this. If you go to the second page, what we did for the 2 readings in one meeting is you'll see that item is on the new business above for the first reading. You discuss it. We would do a motion second and a vote to have it for the second reading at the same meeting. It would require a unanimous approval. Otherwise, it will go to the next meeting for normal consideration. We would still read it, we would still vote on it as usual. But it delineates it in this section so that you know it's coming. So if you have concerns about it, you can discuss it with us in advance as well. Any questions?
Who else does it like this?
Springfield and Joplin do some similar things. Springfield's it has a lot of different headings on there, but they do consent agenda with ordinances. They actually don't read the ordinances when they're on the consent agenda, but they also do have some second readings that are on there as well. But they do emergency ordinances, and they have certain ones that are classified. They have like 6 or 7 types of ordinances that are classified as emergency. So they just have a lot of different options there.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Please.
Branson also does this particular part of the procedure we've outlined in terms of the reading of the titles as part of the consent agenda on the motion and a second, and then asks the city clerk, would you read the titles? She reads, and then they vote. That's how Branson handles that part of it.
Sorry, I haven't thought my way through this question, so I'm just going to start talking and see what comes out. Does this change in any way adversely affect the citizens? Does this keep the citizens from being able to come in and talk about it? Do they get enough notice? Is there anything about this that would keep the citizens from being able to be properly notified and talk about
They
it?
could still talk in the first reading on all of them.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Please.
So yes, they would be able to talk at the first meeting, but also at the same time is how this would work is, having done this many times before, all as a council member, even a mayor would say, I would ask the council's consideration to remove item 7. I received some additional feedback. I'd like some additional discussion with the staff regarding this subject. I also know there's, just for example, Nate Paulson, the gentleman, is here tonight, that it would, he had some questions for me. So basically, if there's feedback between the or prior to the meeting, but a lot of times what you run into on a second read, like we had this tower for city utilities that needed to extend an extension here recently, not on this agenda. It's nothing that affected the citizens. It was something that basically they needed to expedite. Having to wait 2 weeks, we've called special meetings for second reads where it'd be just as easy, like, hey, we have a development, there's no community present for the planning and zoning meeting, there's no comment. And those that have sat through some of the agenda items tonight, when you see the second read and there's no conversation up here regarding the second read, they're like, okay, that could have been done on a consent agenda. Because sometimes I think they're like, you guys even going to talk about what you're going over tonight? Like, there's nothing to really cover. So I think it allows you the opportunity to withdraw that agenda item, and I see that a lot. Like, I'd like to talk about this a little bit more and get more clarification from Chris or Garrett, from one of the employees. So it still allows you the time to discuss the subject.
Okay. Other questions on this issue?
Mr. Mayor, just so I'm clear, that can be done by any single council member, or does that take a motion and a second from a council to remove from the?
What I have historically seen, just to be clear, out of respect to that council person, if one person says, I would like to talk about this, it should be something that I believe, and I think that's a parliamentary procedure. I don't know if it's actually statutorily required that there is a vote. I think that you could say, I'd like to remove item 7. And I think that has to be removed so that it can be considered. I think that that's something that is more parliamentary than it is in Robert's Rule of Order than it is as part of the actual charter and ordinance itself.
Mr. Mayor.
Please.
And to clarify, I think, are you asking about removing something from the consent agenda to an old business for final passage and vote and discussion?
Just from the consent agenda, just as the first read, when we see it, and we wanted to discuss it before that first read.
So single council member can ask for something to be removed from the consent agenda and placed in regular order of business.
So, Mr. Mayor, how that would work procedurally, Councilmember Franklin, say when the mayor says, I'll entertain a motion to place the consent agenda on the agenda for approval, you'd say, do I have a motion and second? Any discussion? At that point, you'd say, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to remove items 4, 6, and 7 for further discussion. Okay, any other discussion? Roll call, and then the vote would take place at voting for 1, 2, 3, 5. So that would work.
If I may, it's only second readings that would be on the consent agenda.
But that would apply for all consent agenda items in general. I'm just talking in general terms, resolutions or ordinances.
So then the second reading comes up later on down the line in the new business? Is that correct? Or does that consent agenda item take care of?
Those are two separate things. So only second readings would go on the consent agenda. We will still have first readings in new business.
Okay.
It's just that there may be some items that we'll do a second reading in the same meeting. That'll be in that second new business column for second readings.
Okay, I'm following you now.
Mr. Gerke, I think you had a question.
So if it was to be removed, when does it get presented again then?
Right there. So basically, when you go to when you go into, like, say it's old, it would go under old business because it's the second read.
And it'd kind of kick back to what we do now.
It is. It would basically just drop down that we need to pick up. So if it was you jumping down to say ordinance 2358 and say it was 2357, you just put 2357 ahead of 2358 and go through it just like it was normal. But what I would suggest is this is historically how it works. Normally, staff knows that because we've got a call prior to the meeting saying, hey, I'm going to want to pull item 4 from consent. That's traditionally how it's worked over my career.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, we will move on to item number 16. I would entertain a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 23-68 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
Did you get that, Laura? Yes. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? I think that was 8-0. Right? Anybody want to object to 8-0? All right, seeing none. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council proposing an amendment to the city charter to include capital planning in the annual budget process, calling an election to be held on April 2nd, 2024 on the proposed amendment, authorizing and directing the city clerk to give notice to the county clerk of said election, and providing for enactment of the proposed amendment if approved. So the last meeting, you got to hear the capital improvement plan for the next 5 years. We do this every year. I can't say that there's a whole lot of thought put into that as far as planning for the budget part of that. So what we're proposing is to eliminate the capital improvement plan and just put capital planning under the annual budget portion. So what we would be budgeting for and planning for the 5-year period would be property, it would be enterprise funds, and it would be large capital planning. It would not be vehicles and equipment that you'll see on the capital improvement plan currently. And it would just be the things that are really important and we really need to start planning for in advance. Hopefully, we know that we need cars.
Thank you, ma'am.
Questions?
Any questions on this issue? Seeing none, we will move on to item number 17 on our agenda. Did I do that wrong?
You're doing well,
All
sir.
right. No. I would entertain a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 23-69 by title only, please.
Motion. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
I paused long enough. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 8-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council proposing an amendment to the city charter by repealing Section 10.3 pertaining to temporary permitting for public utilities, calling an election to be held on April 2nd, 2024 on the proposed amendment, authorizing and directing the city clerk to give notice to the county clerk of said election, and providing for enactment of the proposed amendment if approved.
Thank you, ma'am.
This is a complete strike through of the section. This is one that we actually passed in 2019, and since 2019, we have not taken a single ordinance to council on this. Recently, we just approved new code changes to Chapter 515, which covers all of the right-of-way permitting. This is something that they do administratively, and we don't see the need to continue having this on the charter when we have it covered under our law.
Thank you, ma'am. Questions on this issue? All right. Seeing none, please remember this is a first read, as all of these have been. So if you have questions, get with staff. Laura, you've done a nice job. Well done.
Great job, Laura.
Moving on to other business, specifically resolutions. This is number 18, 23-R-68, a resolution of the City Council authorizing execution of a memorandum of understanding with the Southwest Missouri Joint Municipal Water Utility Commission regarding reallocation of Stockton Lake surface water for use as a public water supply. I need a motion and a second to take up resolution 23-R-68, please.
Motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Andrew Nelson, Assistant City Administrator. If you caught KY3 this morning, there was a news story briefly about the City of Springfield and an allocation of surface water to supply the City of Springfield for future drinking water. What they didn't mention is there's a myriad of other cities that are a part of this coalition to receive water from Stockton Lake. And this is something that I think my slides are a little bit out of order here. Let's start here. Here's our current members of the coalition, and it started in 2003, but I think the City of Republic started participating shortly after Mr. Cameron arrived in 2016. But here you can see that roughly we represent about 850,000 people with this effort to receive surface water from Stockton Lake. The original organization was known as Tri-State Water. As we established different roles and rules for the partners that are involved, because you have utility providers and you have municipalities. There's really two wings of one organization that divides the municipalities from the utility providers that are private utility providers. But this timeline kind of puts into perspective how long it takes to plan for a surface water supply from a lake, especially like a Corps managed recreation lake. And I'm going to try to be brief. Because this is probably one
First time for everything,
right?
man.
You only thought the meeting was long until I got up here. This is a process that has been going on for a long time, and before you'll notice in the language of this resolution, we're approving a non-binding memorandum of understanding. When we make a binding decision, it's warranted of a much longer discussion about master planning for water supply. But to be brief and continue with our participation, I'm going to try to just give a very broad synopsis. So there's really two phases to this project. One is, hey, we want water out of Stockton Lake, and then 2 is building a pipeline from Stockton Lake all the way to Springfield to Republic and all the way down to Joplin. So what we're talking about here is just raising our hand and saying, we want some of that water out of Stockton Lake. And that comes with a cost because the Corps paid for managing Stockton Lake. So tonight it's really just about the allocation of water. I'm not going to go through the whole timeline. This is the important part. If you watched the story this morning, CU talked about their percentage roughly being 30% of the total contract for allocation of water. $46 million is what it cost for all of these communities to pull water from Stockton Lake. Republic is asking for 6.5%. It's a 2.5 million gallon per day request. Right now we supply about 1.5 to 2 million depending on the day, depending on the time of year. What we're trying to do is plan for a supplemental water supply. So this would be on top of what we already supply in groundwater. The reason that behind this effort and not that we're not pursuing additional groundwater is we don't know what the regulation for drawing water from the ground will look like in the future. In this particular project that's been going on for 20 plus years now, there's going to come a point in time where when you have to bind yourself to the agreement. If you don't bind yourself to the agreement, you don't get in later on. So in reality, it's probably 10 or 15 years before any of this water would be delivered to this community or any of the other communities, but you're making that decision probably in the next couple of years. This, what we have in front of you is just a nod in official support and participation in contract negotiations for the allocation of the water.
So I know we've talked about this before, right?
We have.
All right, thank you. Remind me what we've talked about before in the past, and then put this in perspective of that.
The first item that would have been in front of the council was just general participation. Like, we want to join this coalition at periods of time. We've brought before you our water master plan. So in 2017, we started our Burns and McDonnell effort for water and wastewater master planning. And at that time, I would have probably given a spiel about water supply in general. And we have a great groundwater supply. Like, our consultant says, as of today, as long as you can be permitted to draw water from the ground, there's enough water in the ground to supply Republic. Most of those communities to the west of us on that list don't have that benefit. It's not time for us to say we're good, because again, if we miss the bus, we've missed the bus. And that pipeline's likely coming through our backyard regardless if we participated in it or not.
Define backyard. Like, do they know?
I-44 area.
Okay. Mr. Kirky.
Say we never need it. So there's a chance that we could, participate. Say we would participate now, but it never comes to fruition. Correct?
Yep. We would, the allocation itself, if we don't draw from it, there's, to my understanding, and I would want to do some more research into this through the officials, but you could, if we took the allocation but didn't participate in the construction of infrastructure, or if we didn't want to treat raw water in Republic, there's a lot of options to sell your allocation to power generation or other communities. So you're not just stuck with, hey, we bought all this water in Stockton Lake and we don't use it.
So, to clarify, we're not really committing to anything, any cost. If that comes up to the point where we have to put some money in the pot or participate,
right,
then we have another discussion.
Yeah, there is an expense and an effort to undertake the initial contract negotiations for all. You can imagine, with this amount of participation between, no offense, the attorneys and the boards and all the things to get all these contracts in place. It's going to take an amount of time and effort.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Cameron.
So what I would tell you the next phase, because Andrew, I think you've done a great job of explaining, like, just the general, we're not committing to anything other than we want to still stay in the game. But when we get down to the actual cost, because to withdraw water from the lake would then require us to build a treatment plant. With those that know right now that we're spending $100 million on a wastewater plant, you would have to build a water treatment plant that would actually convert it from lake water to consumable. At that time, though, we would provide options to the community as to either you could do that or you could use the word reuse. And so I think with the compatibility of the facility we're building at the wastewater plant. People don't want to hear this, but that's the world you're living in. People are starting to reutilize that, blend it, and produce it back into drinking water qualities. And so before you go and spend those type of numbers, we would do a cost benefit analysis of all the options. But all we're doing tonight, and Andrew's done a great job, is just saying, hey, we're going to continue the ride and see what we can do and see if it's cost effective.
Well, one more thing, if you look close at that chart, you'll notice that we asked for a little bit larger allocation than cities of like size. And the reason behind that is Republic in the Brookline vicinity has the strong likelihood of attracting an industry that would use, say, 1 million gallons a day, whereas some of those other communities are looking mostly at a residential water.
That's good.
Other questions from council on this issue? Seeing none, and as this is a resolution, I can call it immediately for a vote, which is what I will do. All those in favor of 23-R-68, please vote aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? Resolution passes by a vote of 8-0. Thank you, Mr. Mills. Oh, you're next, aren't you? Just stay there. Yeah, that's what you were going to do. Let's see. Item number 19, this is 23-R-69, a resolution of the City Council authorizing the Builds Department to purchase a combination sewer cleaning truck, a trailer jetter, and a street sweeper from Armor Equipment at bid price provided to the Missouri Department of Transportation through Sourcewell. I need a motion and a second to take up Resolution 23-R-69, please.
Motion. Second.
I have a motion and a second.
I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I'm an engineer, not a PowerPoint builder, so it's pretty plain. I've already got comments, okay? Steffi does a much better job, I know.
Steffi, just take PowerPoint off his computer.
Yeah. So 2 of these pieces of equipment are replacements. I'm going to go real quick through those. One, the street sweeper, approximate age 18 years. When I came to Republic in 2017, the guys told me, like, hey, that doesn't work, and we've managed to creep it along for the past 7 years-ish. Just about every time we run it, it breaks down on us. It sweeps the streets. That's the main function, but there are a couple of compliance issues that we have to follow with our MS4 permit. Anything that comes from the street into our storm system, not wastewater, stormwater system, DNR is starting to increase regulation and or tracking. So in our MS4 permit, we would log how much street sweeping we're doing in an effort to reduce the amount of contaminants that would make it into our losing streams. 319,000, fairly expensive piece of equipment. One other function, as I'm told, is our crack sealing program is a little bit tougher when we don't have a street operational street sweeper to prepare for that. And I believe, and they can correct me if I'm wrong with nodding, but I think it applies some weed killer to those cracks as well.
They're getting a lot of amusement out of this.
I know, I can feel it.
Yeah.
They know better because next time I'll put them up here. The jetter trailer, this is our current jetter trailer, 25 years, and you can tell by looking at it. It went down on us a few weeks ago. This is our primary piece of equipment. If we receive a call that says, hey, my toilet's backed up in the house, this is our primary piece of equipment to go out and clean mains, clean laterals, and respond to those. We also clean most of our sewer lines with this right now. And there's one piece of this trailer, and I bet they don't know that I remember this. If I can get the thing to work. That right there is a basket. And I want to highlight that because what we do currently with that machine is something that, and with that basket, is fish out the things that we flush out. And the next piece of equipment will retrieve those. So I want to point that out.
Such a fun topic.
Yeah. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about I&I. Unfortunately, we have a $150 million problem to tackle, so it's warranted that we spend a little bit of time talking about I&I, inflow and infiltration, if you didn't know. But specifically, how does this combo truck or back truck help us? This is just a general, not the one we're buying particularly, but kind of a depiction of how a vac truck functions. So the jetter head, that right there is what would be attached to our jetter normally. Pressurized water to loosen the debris. The piece that the vac truck offers us is this piece, which is a vacuum. $536,000 for this particular truck, and why we're spending so much time on it. If I haven't said it already, we've got a $150 million problem and only $100 million of funds at the moment. So I want to spend a little bit of time to talk about why this is a value add when we're behind on the capital program. Wouldn't be fun if I didn't bring some nasty pictures. This is a standard sewer pipe. The primary function of that truck is to remove that material. When you're talking about I&I, we can't find it if we can't see it. So before we can camera, before we can look at those pipes and assess them, we have to clean them. I want to note too that I've got 2 employees tonight that are in Columbia getting their PACP certification, which is a pipeline assessment certification, so that when we do clean the pipes and when we do take camera footage, they can assess that line and say, hey, this line needs replacement, it needs to be lined, and start to identify our I&I problems. This is really, I call it a second primary function, and if you ask these guys behind me, this might be the one we're most excited about. You'll see this picture here, that most of us see that. Anywhere we go in town where there's construction going on, we've called in a utility locate, and that's what it looks like. The other 2 pictures show you what it looks like when we start to dig. And the issue is most of our utility is at the bottom of that trench. And when you're excavating, these guys are very skilled, but it's dangerous. And what this machine will allow you to do is use the pressurized nozzle to excavate and the vacuum portion of it to remove the material. So the lower picture there is a typical residential utility corridor where you've got cable, power, fiber, all those things. And likely at the bottom of that particular trench is either a water or sewer line. So this to us is one of the more beneficial features. I can recall one evening I came in, 4 guys here responding to a water leak, and Josh was standing in his knees, up to his knees in water in this trench, and he's like, I might have to gesture, but he's fishing around. I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, there's a 4-inch high pressure gas main in here. And, and sitting over him is Eric with the backhoe. And I'm like, you guys have a lot of trust between each other. But this would allow a safer excavation so that we can find those utilities. It would also allow, in a bad situation, for us to go in and excavate without a locate, because it's a non-invasive type of excavation.
What about time? Will it save time also, or is it similar in time using a backhoe? Or
it's faster, just because they're not being as delicate.
Can I get a few nods from people that know? All right, thank you.
Yeah, what'd you come here if you're not gonna nod?
Yeah, I didn't get a harump out of that guy. So some additional functions. I mentioned MS4 compliance. We can clean our stormwater system with this, our inlets, and we're in the process, if the citizens haven't noticed, the council hasn't noticed, we're painting every inlet right now with a little stencil. MDNR is coming out with more regulation on stormwater that mirrors the type of regulation we see in wastewater. So where we're going, just an example that should push you to be involved is MDNR would like us to regulate residents being able to wash their car in their driveway. They would like us to illegalize that and enforce it. And I don't intend to do that because wouldn't enjoy those conversations, but that's where they're going. They're saying that, when you wash a car, all the oils and greases, the soap, all that gets into the stormwater system and eventually there's testing. All those things are on the table for this series of pictures is pretty gross. It's a manhole that we had some
Overflow.
Youth that thought it would be fun to clog with rocks. you see kind of what we encountered when we I did not participate in this, when they arrived on the site, started their work, and you'll see that this is the full manhole, and in about 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, here's our employee going in to fish out the rocks and things that are blocking the pipe and not allowing flow. So this truck, he's not in that hole. So now I'm going to spend some time on I&I because it's part of this. But Mr. Cameron did a study session early on. I don't know that most of this council was here for that, but inflow and infiltration, it's water from rain that gets into our storm system. We are under a compliance order right now because so much water makes it into our system. We spill it out of our treatment plant before we can ever treat it. And we've got to, like, it's too much water, we can't take it, we divert it straight into the stream. This is sources of I&I. What I want to show you is how we tell the difference between I&I because we talk about it a lot. The green and blue lines represent the normal flow of our wastewater system. So you can see that when folks get up in the morning, see a little bit more flow. In the afternoon, when they get home, we see a little bit more flow. The line here is the diversion we see when there's a rain event. This would be particularly in the middle of a day. And inflow represents that short peak. Infiltration is water that seeps in over time, so it's this small gap right here. Council authorized us in 2018 to go into flow monitoring, so we've installed flow meters in the entire city to monitor our system in both dry events and in runoff events so that we can begin to understand where the biggest problem is in the city. This is some of that data that's collected. So the black line you see is the average for this particular drainage basin, and then all the diversions represent different flows at different times, whether the rain was in the morning or in the evening. All of that data told us, and there's one section of town missing, but in this graphic, but where the biggest problems were in the city. It also told us which pipes were misbehaving and at which manholes we could expect to overflow in those events. Pipes misbehaving is an indicator of potentially pipes that are clogged. So it also gave us kind of an area to start. And that's what I want to communicate with this truck is it gave us a prioritized kind of geographic location to go into the city with the purchase of this new truck to start to clean lines and inspect them to say this is the most problematic area in the city that we need to start lining pipes, replacing pipes, or just cleaning them. Some of the problems we have are just pipes that don't get the proper amount of flow through them. And because I know you want to know what a pipe looks like when it's misbehaving on a graph, this is it. This shows that the depth in the pipe is going up, but the speed of the water is not. So what it's saying is your pipe's getting fuller, but it's not moving on down the line. There's a pipe that is behaving. This
and that's all. You have those pipes, like you know where that green dot is in the city, and you'd go clean that green dot out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This particular area represents call it FM 109, but it's the biggest problem in the city, and generally this is the oldest part of the city, which makes sense. But you're talking about the area between US 60 and the railroad from Maine to the east in general right here. This kind of assessment of that, and we have, for each of those flow basins, we have an assessment, and it gives us a target of potential I&I that we could reduce, because you'll never get it all. But if you look here, like the two main problems with this is the pipe material. So 62% or more is vitrified clay pipe, which is a problem. We don't use that anymore. It's not terribly reliable. And then right here, it refers to the pipe age. Most of the pipe in this is from 50 to 70 years old. So really it's an age and condition problem with I&I in this particular area. We can't assess it until we clean it and camera it. Hence the truck. This CIP list was informed by our master plan that the council adopted in 2020. I just wanted to highlight here that there's really 5 projects that were focused on I&I alone in our, roughly each one of these projects altogether about $35 million in collections systems improvements. So how does the backtrack help, right? We got to talk about that. There's 4 immediate action projects that represent about 180,000 linear feet of pipe. We just awarded a contract to do 40,000 feet for $3.61 a foot. About $170,000 in that contract. With our certified inspectors and this truck in operation, we could offset the cost of that truck just in the first 150,000 linear feet of pipe that they take on. If you're wondering about the cost of I&I to a wastewater system, we're spending $20 million today just to take care of the water that we lose. And then we also have to upgrade our plant to provide additional capacity. And roughly every million gallons of capacity that we put into our wastewater plant is about $20 to $30 million. This table was put together by engineers, you can tell, because it's a general statement, but they felt the need to tell you need to do 29.9% instead of 30. It's just a general industry standard of the percentage of maintenance you should do in your system annually. So it tells us just in cleaning we should be doing roughly 30% of our system. The city has 150 miles of collection and force main pipe, 800,000 linear feet, and 3,000 manholes. And you can see that there's roughly 20% of our manholes should be inspected.
Are we coming anywhere close to that right now? What are we doing right now?
We hired a contractor until we get the truck on site.
Okay.
If it's approved. We also looked kind of just in general at communities that had combo trucks. There's several around here, but there was some interesting information out of Garland, Texas that they've tracked with their GIS where they've increased the maintenance. The amount of emergency calls has dropped dramatically. And in their system, they found that 80% of the problems that they had was in 25% of the system, the oldest part, which is what I would suspect that we would find here. Back to the speed of emergency call outs and preventing them, just in general, when we have a call out for a lateral line, we respond, it's roughly generally 4 hours depending on how bad it is, 3 employees, various equipment. We've done about 50 a year for the last 2 years as far as not during the daytime call outs. And we put a general cost to the city on that, $1,200.
Per call out?
Mm-hmm. That's tracking employee time, the equipment, and then whatever else.
So it's
potentially.
$1,200 times 50 a
Correct.
year. Okay.
Yep. Now those are employees that we have, so it's not like
right.
It's a cost of having the employee. Performance tracking for this piece of equipment. So we have a robust GIS system thanks to Josh. The council's been privy to some of the things we can do with that, but we would track both emergency call-outs, which we're already doing, and versus our maintenance and cleaning efforts, and see what the correlation is. But it also allows us to set those targets at the minimum annual targets. So if we did 30%, that's roughly 230,000 linear feet or 4,500 feet a week. If we hit those minimum targets, again, that shows you it's $830,000 in a contract cost, which is what we awarded previously, versus about $215,000 to have the machine and 2 full-time employees to run it. I wanted to end with some good news about wastewater. So not only are we tackling the 5 in blue, but the collection system, because of the projects that we've approved and the development that's going on in the city, we've tackled a majority of the $30 million problem that we set out to tackle in 2020. I want to just point out that there are items being checked.
That was a great job.
You ready for questions?
I'm ready.
All right. I'm not asking you, actually. Guys, what did he miss? Is there something that he left out that you think that we need to know? You guys are the ones doing the work.
I would say the jetter's about to completely shut down.
Yeah. There's no such thing as a bad thing to say in here. Just, well, there is actually. What's that?
Our street sweeper's not running. We need one back.
How are we going to pay for it all?
Great question. So the likelihood of receiving any of these items this year is almost zero. It is zero.
Sorry.
Yeah, the jetter I think is pretty readily available. So in the first quarter of 2024, we'd be able to purchase the jetter. The two sewer items, we have a restricted cash account that roughly the balance is about $800,000, and I want to talk about that restricted cash and where it came from. Years previous, the way the ordinances were in place regarding utility billing, the way we collected funds, a certain amount of money was set aside every year for capital equipment only. We've kept that kind of in reserve. I mean, we've really kind of been looking at this particular purchase, and we knew it was going to be substantial for the last 2 or 3 years. So that would cover those funds would cover the cost of the jetter and the sewer truck, and then the street fund has the appropriate unrestricted cash and the cash balance to pay for the street sweeper. And I want to mention, because we don't know when we receive that, likely in late 2024, you'll see it in one of the budget amendments come through when we actually are invoiced and receive the equipment.
I hear Mr. Gerke thinking something.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. 3 questions. So again, it's going to be a balance sheet transaction, the budget, because we have the cash, correct?
Correct.
Yep. And then useful life of the new equipment. I mean, I assume that obviously we've had some stuff forever, but what's the?
These guys can keep it running for 100 years.
I mean, a machine that we're going to run that frequently, and when I say frequently, I think Mr. Cameron will note, and myself, that we expect that truck to be operational all the time, is probably 5 to 10 years. I think we have the equipment supplier here that might want to.
We see a combo truck go 10 to 15 years pretty often.
Okay. There's probably a higher likelihood we'll have to get additional equipment while it's still running.
Yeah, I think there's enough of a system there, and as we continue to grow, you probably want a second one.
And this is probably a dumb question. The existing stuff, is there much useful value to it to sell, or what do we do?
We would put it on like one of the government auctions, but
it's scrap.
It's scrap. Yeah.
Thanks.
Other questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Franklin.
And I think you may have touched on this, Andrew. You said that late 2024 would more than likely be when this. Is there any reason for us to have concern that that wouldn't be possible just on supply of?
No, I think we're feeling pretty good about June or July potentially.
So we ordered an allotment of trucks. So we have, right now, it's very promising to have it. Now, that's not saying if something like 2020 happens again, we can't control that.
Sure.
Supply chain, but as right now, we're good.
Thank you.
Anything else? Seeing nothing else, and as this is a resolution, I'd like to call it for an immediate vote, which is what I will do. All those in favor of 23-R-69, please vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution passes. Congratulations, guys.
Yeah. Psych.
Moving on to item number 20 on our agenda. This is 23-R-70, a resolution of the City Council authorizing the application to the Missouri Department of Natural Resources State Infrastructure Program for $25 million for the purposes of capital improvements to the wastewater systems. Yeah.
30 seconds or less, please.
This one's really simple. We were awarded.
Wait. I need a motion and a second to. No, it was my fault. I stopped. Yeah. I need a motion and a second to take up resolution 23-R-70, please.
Motion.
Second.
There, now go.
30 seconds.
28 now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We were allotted $25 million by the state of Missouri. This resolution goes into the attachment of an application for those funds. So it's required that we apply for them. I'm assuming that we want them, so we're recommending approval.
Do we have any questions on this issue?
Yes. Good job.
Seeing none, I will call 23-R-70 for immediate vote. All those in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution passes. Moving on to item number 21, this is 23-R-71, a resolution of the City Council awarding the bid to supply certain furnitures, fixtures, and equipment for the Republic Aquatic Park to resort contract furnishings. That's my fault, not yours.
No problem.
I need a motion and a second to take up resolution 23-R-71, please.
Motion.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Good evening.
Good evening, Garrett Klein, Recreation Superintendent. Republic of Parks and Recreation has accepted bids for the select furnitures, fixtures, and equipment for the Republic Parks and Recreation expansion, known as the Rush, the Republic Aquatic Park. Within the diagram, you will see there are a variety of chairs throughout the facility. We currently have 110 existing chairs. The blue Chase Lounge chairs there, those are a Grossflix product, just as every other item listed here. Those bright blue chairs that are depicted are the existing chairs. With that 110, we are purchasing new slings for all replacement for those existing chairs. In addition, we have 140 all-new chairs that will be coming to match that with custom Navy slings. So all 110 existing chairs will be reslung with the Navy sling, and then 140 additional with the new Navy sling coming custom as well. In addition to that, we will have 30 Java wicker chairs available in terraces and cabanas throughout the facility, low top tables and standard tables as well. So staff is recommending approval, entering into the contract with Resort Contract Furnishings, submitting the lowest bid.
Questions from council on this issue? Mr. Franklin?
Mr. Mayor, the only question I really had on this, Garrett, is the difference between the high bid and the low bid. Are we comfortable with everything was included in the bid that we're planning on accepting?
Yes, absolutely. Within the packet, there were exact specifications for what they should be matching, including these products. So Resort Contract Furnishings is the organization that provided us with the initial furnitures, fixtures, and equipment within 2005 with the Aquatic Center opening. So this is an organization we've worked with in the past, and they have matched the exact specifications and met the required dates. So.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Updike?
And who we renamed it the Rush? It's called the Rush now.
Yes, that has been at previous city council meetings. However, it has not been published through Republic Parks and Recreation pages, but it is commonly referred to by our staff, and making it an apparent point to call it the Rush, the Republic Aquatic Park. So.
Mr. Gerke, did I see a question from you?
Mr. Franklin.
Perfect. Anybody on this side?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say.
All right, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. I would call 23-R-71 for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We have furniture. Moving on to item number 22 on our agenda. This is 23-R-72, a resolution of the City Council expressing support for the support for the proposed U.S. bicycle route 251 through the city between Springfield and Northwest Arkansas, and requesting designation of the route as an official U.S. bike route recognized by the American Association of the State Highway and Transportation Officials. I need a motion and a second to take up resolution 23-R-72, please.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Sorry, I'm getting punchy. That was my fault. So
Read that again, Mayor. I thought that was awesome.
Oh my gosh, I was like, is that a word? Just here we go.
Good evening again. You may or may not be aware that as we have designated routes for cars, there are also designated routes for bikes. There is currently a bike route being designed and being constructed that travels from New Orleans all the way to Northwest Minnesota, United States Bicycle Route 51. So there is an alternative leg of this larger route that is being suggested that we're asking you to approve a part of tonight, or I'm sorry, to write a letter of support for tonight. And that goes through Republic. So this is an alternative to a piece of this route that goes from Springfield to Northwest Arkansas. And the route will, as you can see highlighted on the map, it'll utilize the new Schuler Creek Trail, head west down Lynn Street, and then we'll go west again on County Road and head out to the Billings area. So that's the portion that would be in the city. We're just asking that you write a letter, that we will provide the letter, that you have a letter of support for this part of the project.
Questions on this issue? Mr. Updike?
And is this going to be similar to the transcontinental bike road that runs through the Halltown area? Be something similar to that?
So these are designated bike routes that are designated by AASHTO, the American Association of Highway Transportation Officials. So they're specific. Some of these, there's many other routes that are included, and some of those are pieces of these larger routes. I don't know if that is among one of those exact routes.
Because I know every year, myself, I'm not a bike rider, but I do follow this. It runs from the East Coast from the West Coast to the East Coast, and one of the stops is in Ash Grove, and it also runs down through Route 66 for a little bit of ways through Halltown up through Ash Grove. So I didn't know if this was going to be something similar to that, where they'll be having transcontinental races from the top, from like Chicago to New Orleans, or they can just have it just for general routes to ride.
I don't know what the eventual use of the route will be. Some of these routes are made up of various different types of connections and trails and bike infrastructure. So I think it really depends on, how you can utilize that is kind of based on the material that those trails are made of in some cases.
Mr. Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does this have a direct, immediate cost to the citizens of Republic?
There's no cost. There's definitely a benefit of advertising the incoming amenities to the city and drawing attention to the city for what is a national trail that would pass through us.
Sure. So there's no improvements that we would have to do. It's just a simple designation, and we're pretty well ready to go.
We'll be utilizing an improvement that we're already that we're preparing to begin working on in the Schuler Creek Trail.
Okay. Gotcha.
Just mean more people from Arkansas are going to come here.
Ideally, it means more people from everywhere would come.
I don't know if you can glean from my tone.
Careful. Maybe even more from Texas.
Not a fan. Just going to say it.
I'm not going to take that personal.
You're from Miller.
I'm from Miller.
Yeah. Any other questions? Seeing no other questions, we will call 23-R-72 for an immediate vote. All those in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution passes by a vote of 8-0. For those of you keeping track, we are on our final agenda item, 23-R-73. This is a resolution of the City Council authorizing the City Administrator to execute a memorandum of understanding with Drury Properties, Inc. for right-of-way access at U.S. Highway 60 and Farm Road 107 as part of the New Republic Intermediate School project. I read that one much better.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done.
I need a motion and a second to take up Resolution 23-R-73. Motion.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This memorandum of understanding really is the city's more of a party to an agreement between the school district and Drury Properties. There's an exchange of property for right-of-way. So there's a portion of their property that the school is not going to use that they're going to exchange for the right-of-way. The concern of the property owner is that's a public street, so we grant the access rights. So this memorandum of understanding upon the transaction of the parcels would allow for us to grant the access. It just defines that ahead of time so that he understands that he will in fact have access to that public street.
Questions from council on this issue? Seeing none, and
there's a better picture. The future.
There you go.
I know this isn't us, but what's the anticipated completion date for the school?
They plan to open the school for classes in August of 2025. Construction on this particular access point, this is at I should have identified this at Farm Road 107 along US 60, would start pretty much immediately.
Have they started moving dirt out there already?
They are. Yeah, there's a substantial amount of site work for this school already in progress.
Thanks.
Leave that picture.
We will call 23-R-73 for an immediate vote. All those in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution passes by a vote of 8-0. That concludes this portion of our agenda, and we will move on to reports from staff.
Almost like we need like a 2-second recess. 2-minute. Just kidding. I commend you all for everyone that's here tonight too to sit through that meeting. That's one of the longest we've had all year. We only got one meeting this year. I want to leave this slide up for just a second because Andrew I know it's running late, but I think he just glazed right over this thing, and I want to stop for just a moment because I remember on a napkin, 2018-19, he came to me.
The napkin.
And he had a crazy drawing for me, and it's nothing more than if you look up there to your left corner, you'll see where the roundabout is, and it kind of splits and runs right down there at the very bottom where they're building the apartments now. There was no regional park, and we began to lay out a charrette around it, a charrette, kind of a drawing. I said that, it was not profanity. But this was Andrew's vision. And that school being there, he had an idea of putting a school, a library, a city hall. And this whole layout, this whole vision, what he just did was negotiated a street that wasn't necessarily even for the city, but was to benefit that school. And I want to tell you the work that's had to go through to get to that, what he's doing. This is almost like even advocating not even for the city. And I want to commend you for your leadership because we sit here and the mayor gives me that we just don't talk about it enough, but the amount of money we just saved the school district by installing the water line for them was around, with our crews that are here tonight, you're going to save them about $1.5 to almost $3 million, and they're going to utilize that to expand it. But getting that access to US 60 was nothing short of spectacular by the work that Andrew did, the work that Megan's going to do to draft it up. But the negotiations to get that part was all established by just one little napkin drawing that I thought he was crazy. And I'm like, you know what? Well, let's do it. And then we went and bought 136 acres. And I just want to commend you. I want to commend everybody, this council and everyone that's participated in buying that property and seeing that through. Andrew, I thank you for your vision and your passion to see that project through, because I know we catch all sorts of grief, but we do plan, we do lay these things out, but it takes investors to buy into that vision. And I think that the work of our crews that have helped us achieve that goes overlooked. And I want to draw attention to this right there, that all those drawings and lines are conceptual drawings that were put together by us and by that man right there. So I just want to draw attention to that. So thank you. So thank you for the spirited discussion, and I love seeing, especially a citizen business owner, show up and express that. I think that gentleman did a fantastic job. I'm not going to get on a soapbox on wastewater tonight, but I want to share to the community what Andrew shared with you on that vac truck. Gentlemen, ladies that are part of that team, I did not have you come up here on purpose. I just threatened you with it prior to coming. But I want to tell the community that's what happens when that vehicle should have been purchased 10 years ago. That work should have been begun 10 years ago, and that's what the compliance order was figure out how to reduce the stormwater in the system. And to that crew, I want to tell you the amount of equipment and things that we've invested. Money follows trust. The citizens are giving you equipment. And what I'm saying, I told you all the other day, you run that. Our promise to you is we'll bring another vehicle to this council, but it has to be running. It's not going to be like the crack seal machine where it sits there for a while. That thing has got to run, right? And so because we got to demonstrate to the community that we're going to go find out where this water from 2011 that we never addressed, that now we're under a compliance order, you're the team that's going to go find out what we should have found out in 2011 and do it much cheaper. And so there is a lot of work that's being tied. Money follows trust. This council's entrusted you with a piece of machinery for $550,000, right? I don't think it'll last 10 years because I think the way we're going to run it, what we need it for, you're going to need the second one. So we're committed to making sure, I know in this leadership, we're committed to making sure you have the equipment. I know Andrew's demonstrated it, this council's demonstrated to make sure you have those resources in your hand. But it's got to be running, right? It's going to run, right, Eric? It's going to run, Mike? That's right. So I know you appreciate it. And I just want to commend Eric. What is your tenure? 30 years? You just celebrated 30 years with the city. Yours is how long? 15. Yours, right? I'm sorry.
Like 32.
32. You got Eric beat. What the average tenure in the public or the builds department is 18 years. I just want to commend you for sticking with it and hanging out with us and doing the work that you guys do and crawling in manholes that nobody sees. So thank you for that work. I'm not going to go through the whole admin report, but there is one agenda item that I want to bring your attention to that's at the very top. And I'm not going to make too big of a deal about it, but we're going through pre-filed bills that were pre-filed. this last week. One that drew my attention was Senate Bill 979, that is being sponsored by our state senator that's here locally. But it is a bill that would allow the city of Springfield to annex with 6 miles outside their city limit without being compact and contiguous, which would put portions of our community that where you could potentially go all the way out to almost Hood's truck stop and almost come around to our western boundary. That would allow them to not have to be compact and contiguous. And so I look forward to finding out if there's more information regarding this bill, the legalities of that, how that could have potential impact, speaking with our state senator, but also with representatives from Springfield as to the intent of said bill. We received no information of it, but it does provide some level of concern for not only us, but the fire districts in every other community that is not part of the city of Springfield. And so we will continue to monitor that as well. Mr. Campbell, to you and your family, congratulations and welcome to the city council. And to everyone here, I would just tell you, this is our last meeting of the year, so we saved the longest meeting for the last. It's a blessing to lead this community, be a part of it. I will say this from my own perspective, don't forget the reason for the season. I mean, it's a great time. Celebrate Christmas with friends and family. Be responsible on New Year's, have a good time, but we also got a law enforcement group that would appreciate those that would stay inside while they're enjoying their eggnog. But I appreciate the staff and this council and those that have signed up to serve and be a part of it. It's for $200 a month for some or $400 a month for others. It's just, these are long meetings away from family and ball games. But it's been another outstanding year. But 2024, I promise you, again, it's like I told the staff the other day, we're strapped to a rocket ship and we're going to continue to advance through good and bad. And so I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. That's all. And
Thanks.
we do have executive session.
Yeah. Reports from council.
Mr. Mayor.
Sir.
I just had a kind of quick question to bring up. It was from discussing with Andrew about the traffic map and replacing streets and what needed help there. Is that something that we could do for sidewalks around the city? Because there's sections that the sidewalk's in pretty rough shape, sections where sidewalk's incomplete, that kind of thing, to kind of get that as a planning for the future of when we're going to complete those.
Mr. Mayor?
Please.
So what I would suggest we do, the answer to that is no. I mean, we do not have a master sidewalk plan. I think, and that's not really an excuse, but it's just the truth, is that our focus was there was no funding plan for streets until the public safety ballot passed. So actually having a funding mechanism for sidewalks was probably, in certain situations, we got one down on, what's the connection down there at Hines and Oakwood on the south side? There's no connecting sidewalk at all to the trail. So I think the more that we had those conversations that we could talk about it, and if we had people that were identifying specific areas that we could get them on a list, I don't think it'd be no time, especially with GIS and with our outstanding crew, we would identify where those locations would be in short order. And they'd love to replace sidewalk in addition to cleaning sewer. Next.
Any other? Yes, sir.
I would like to talk a little bit about streetlights. There's lights out all over town. As an example, there at Elm Street and 60, 4 of the 5 lights are out. That's a MoDOT deal, but the city's got them all over the place. And what I was wondering, Mr. Police Chief, what would be the chances of night when your people are cruising and not being called to problems? What would be the chance of possibly getting them, when they notice a street light, write it down where it's at, and then into the shift, I turn it in to the appropriate people so they could turn it in and get the lights fixed? Would you think that could possibly be possible?
We've actually done that before, and it is possible. Sometimes they're just so busy they can't do that, but
I
yeah, we can
realize
talk to
that.
some of the guys.
Mr. Nelson.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I recall, there was a certain patrol sergeant that actually gave me that list, sitting back there as chief now when I started here. But yes, I know that we're tackling streetlights because we've noticed I don't know why issue of frequent streetlights out, but I'm signing. So when we get those reported to us, if we can get them to reported to us, we send that off to Liberty and they make the repair. And it takes a little bit of time, but if we can get an idea, certainly we'll have our crews out too, looking for streetlights that are out.
Mr. Mayor, perhaps we could just put out a blitz even on our social media page. If you're a resident and you have a notification, just even tag it onto our Facebook page so we at least have an address and we can start putting them on a list. Quit shooting them out with a slingshot, Gary. It might hurt. Stop. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Starting down here, any reports from council? Mr. Franklin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a special thank you to Ms. McCulloch. This last week, I had a chance to come observe our staff, and also our Judge McBride. Thank you for that opportunity to come and observe court. It was a very interesting time, and I really did enjoy that very much. A lot of things going on in this room, like 4 different things at once. I was very impressed by the process and also how smooth everything ran. It was very impressive. Very much appreciate that. So, Republic Fire Department, I'd like to thank Chief Compton. Last week, I think I got to go down, spend an afternoon with the fire crew, and we did a little bit of a training. They gave me a little pair of scissors, and we cut a car in half. And that's no exaggeration. I mean, we started with a car and ended up with, they took all the doors, the window. It was amazing. Just to see the challenges, that sounds simple, but you have so many different things just in cutting that apart to access someone that it was very impressive to see that the airbags and all of the precautions that they take in something that really seems simple, but it's complicated. So I appreciate, that opportunity. They let me to wear some uniform, and so I got to sweat just like a firefighter, and I loved it. So thank you, Chief. I'd also like to thank Laura and Ms. McCullough again for everything we did at the workshop, all of the preparation, and all of that. That was a lot. It's a big agenda and a lot to go through, and so I very much appreciate all of that. Thank you, Laura, for this week or last week on our candidacy and filing with candidates. I appreciate having all that packet and everything, and that process moving smooth. That was in and out and done, so thank you. I appreciate last Friday we had some words from Mr. Cameron and from the mayor. So I really appreciate everything you said at the end of the year meeting, and just extend a congratulations to everyone that did receive awards, from the firefighter awards all the way to the service awards. So just wishing everyone a great holiday, and I'm looking forward to seeing everyone next year.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. Mr. Updike?
I just wanted to give a shout out to the entire community of Republic when the Tigers went to Columbia. I'm guesstimating there's at least 2,000 people at the game, and every voice was heard. And I give a huge shout out to Coach Knudsen and his entire staff in their public school district, and hopefully it won't be the last time we're there.
Excellent. Thank you. Anything else? All right. Well, as mayor, I get the last word. I'm going to echo what Mr. Updike said. One of the great things about being mayor is I get invited to speak at schools, and I love speaking at schools. And I had the opportunity to honor the Republic High School with a proclamation for the outstanding play of their football team this year. And it was really neat to be in an auditorium full of kids excited about going to state. The reason I say that is I know that back in my high school days, I was not on the team, but our basketball team went to the Final Four. And I still remember some of the things that we got to do as students by traveling up to Columbia, seeing the Final Four. So I know from personal experience, the Republic High School students have created memories that will last with them for years and years and years to come. That's neat to be a part of. But I have to say, that's just a sign of our community. I think that's a positive momentum that's coming through Republic. And that's because of the work that we do here in this room. So thank you for the hard work that you do. I think it's starting to be seen in other ways. It's starting to be seen at our schools. It's starting to be seen by other communities, and they're starting to model what we do. And that's because we do it right. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of it. Thank you for letting us be a part of it. And with that, we are, sorry.
It's short and sweet, I promise.
All right. So we are going to have executive session tonight. No further action other than announcing adjournment by the mayor shall take place after an executive session that is scheduled as the last matter on the agenda unless otherwise stated on the agenda or as allowed per RSMO 610.02. Tonight, we will be covering number 2, RSMO 610.021.3, hiring, firing, promotion, or disciplining personnel, closed session, closed vote, closed record.
That's
And
the
num-
wrong one.
Wrong one.
Oh, I'm reading the
Look on the screen.
I'm sorry, it changed on us. Yep. I can't see that without my glasses. Number 1, RSMO 610.021.1, pending and/or potential litigation, closed session, closed vote, closed record. And number 4, RSMO 610.021.12, any documents related to a negotiated contract until a contract is executed or all proposals are rejected. Motion and a second requested for adjournment to executive session.
Motion. Second.
We have a motion and a second roll call voice vote.
Councilmember Gerke,
Aye.
Councilmember Updike,
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell,
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson,
Aye.
Councilmember Neal,
Aye.
Councilmember Franklin,
Aye.
Councilmember Gerlich,
Aye.
Councilmember Fields.
Aye. We are in adjournment. We will reconvene in 2 minutes to go through